All right. It has been a long break. And we are in Jeremiah 16. And I've said this after like several long breaks that after long breaks, it seems like everything falls in place. I have had, and the reason why I probably have like so many papers in front of me is because I've probably read through Jeremiah 16, I don't know, 50 times. And I think that's probably a light amount of times. Because one of the things I've been challenged to do, not only just in Jeremiah 16, but probably just in general, and I'm still trying to find some kind of, I don't know, maybe resolve with it, is when it comes to passages and we're reading through them and doing the work of not only understanding what's happening in the time and the context, but also applying it to us in our lives because of how we view ourselves, because of our lack of understanding in when it comes to judgment and chastisement. A lot of what we do when we read the passages is that we shame and guilt ourselves. We go, "Oh, that's me. Oh, I'm terrible. Oh, I need to fix this." And Jeremiah 16 was really difficult for me because Yah asked Jeremiah to do some very difficult things, like some very difficult and humanly unnatural things. And so normally in reading through a passage, and of course how we traditionally read, obviously, through books of the Bible, is that we kind of go through it and we get the stories and the stuff that doesn't quite kind of fit into a story or a narrative, we kind of like pass over it. And this Jeremiah 16 arrested me because Yah begins to, not that he hasn't before, but Yah begins to make demands of Jeremiah's life that seem beyond the normal human capacity. And so I got stuck. I got stuck in the first part of Jeremiah, and we're going to get into it today. But I'm just giving you the background, my framework, why I'm coming from this particular angle. So I got stuck in the beginning of Jeremiah for weeks. And I realized, and sometimes I get frustrated with myself because I'm like, why can't I just move through books and chapters and passages and concepts like normal people, what I consider to be, normal people, where they're like, all right, we'll be right back here next week. And I'm like, I can't, I'm invested. Like, I need to understand, like, why? And maybe I'm not that bright because I haven't learned yet that asking Yah why something, he's like, let me show you. And I'm like, oh, never mind. I'm okay with whatever Jeremiah was experiencing. That was fine because I don't have to understand. I'm just kidding. No, never mind. Too late. So in diving into the beginning portion, Yah had to like shift my mind, like literally like stop focusing right here. I could not get past the first part. And what Yah showed me was the formula for great redemption. So today we're going to deal with a lot of Jeremiah, but I'm also going to bring in some concepts for redemption. And so a great redemption has three portions, and it could be more, it could be nuanced, it could be, broken down further. But the first is recompense. The second step is confession. And the last part is revelation. And I couldn't get past the first part to see this for, I think the last time we were together was like November something, maybe even further back. Because in judgment and chastisement, we miss the blessing. There's not many people who, when I've mentioned this concept that became, and still is true for me, even though it's uncomfortable in certain seasons, that everything that happens to me is the best possible thing that could happen to me. Hard stuff to deal with in this life because the intensity and the intricacies of the things that we experience in this life and what they do to our minds, our bodies, our spirit, everything is rough. But what I'm realizing, not only from this Jeremiah passage, from this, just doing the Jeremiah series, but in this particular chapter, but in life in general, that judgment and chastisement is a gift. And so I'm learning, and I hope through this passage and through Jeremiah's stance and his ability to walk circumspect to Yah in such an unnatural way for me as a human, that we stop mourning what has been declared dead. And we stop mourning what has been declared dead, because whatever has been declared dead in our life needed to be that way. And that is difficult, that is layered, and that is nuanced. We'll get into it into a second. But specifically talking about the things in us that Yah has said, okay, you've been judged, you've been chastised. We tend to carry those things with us. And we shame our right now, our present restoration, because you're restored from the thing because you're living past it. You're living on the other side of it. But we shame our right now based upon the punishment or the judgment and the chastisement of the past. So we never actually get past it, because then even where we are presently is directly connected to what we've overcome. But it would be silly, right, if you were a plant and the plant shamed itself for being a seed. The plant shamed itself for having to be planted. The plant shamed itself because the ground had to be torn and stripped and broken and amended. And it shamed itself because the previous season it had to be pruned. And guess what? The plant would never see the beauty of the fruit that was born, the fact that any came forth from it. You know me, like back in the day, gardening was the thing. And until you've planted something that takes a long time to bear, you don't understand the blessing of just one piece of fruit showing up on a tree. See, we are looking for bounty, but you don't know how long it takes and what the master gardener had to do to just get that one thing to show up. But then we shame it for being one. And then we get 5 and it's like, oh, but it's only 5. And then you get 20, but it's only 20. And Yah's like, you don't understand that this has always been the process. It was always only going to be 1 at first. And as you yield it to the process, it would be 5. And as you yield it to the process, it would be 30. And it would continue to grow. And I had a tree once, and I'm going to get into this, but it fits. I had a tree, and I bought it at a year old. So at a year old, it didn't put on anything. It would blossom, but it wouldn't fruit. And I'd never experienced that before, because most of the time, either you buy a tree, I did at least, because it's very indicative of my personality. I would try to find the trees at the nursery that already had fruit on them. I didn't want the ones. I was like, even if it just has one piece, I'm like, okay, you're good. And so I bought a tree, didn't have any fruit on it. And a year went by. And if you know anything about putting trees in the ground, it's sensitive. You talk about disrupting root systems and so forth. Put it in the ground, I'm watering it, I'm amending it, nothing. Watering it, amending it, nothing. Second year, nothing. Third year, this tree looks like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree of an apple tree. It was just raggedy. And I was just like, what is happening? Third year, it started shooting out all these branches. And I was like, oh, we're about to get all these buds came on. I was so excited. And then it put on 1 apple. Just one apple. And it wasn't even a big apple. It was one measly apple. But oh, I was so excited for this 1 apple. So excited that I just watched the apple on the tree. Just watched it. I actually never picked it off, and I just waited. So I was like, oh, it'll get bigger. It's going to get bigger. Oh, this apple, this is the apple. And when I finally picked the apple off the tree, it was mushy. I left it on too long. And I was so concerned and so excited with this tree bearing fruit that I didn't continue to do the process of amending and putting it in a position to grow. And I say that because it still requires work, even when you see evidence of fruiting. And throughout Jeremiah's life, we're well into his life at this point. You would think that up until this point, Jeremiah's obedience would mean that Yah wouldn't keep asking him for more. What more could you ask of a person that's been hated? What more could you ask of a person whose faith is struggling because of everything that's happening around them. What more can you ask of a person who feels alone and isolated? What more can you require of me? Yeah. And in this requiring more of Jeremiah, and this is the part that makes me excited, in this requiring more of Jeremiah that I couldn't move past, one of the, and I'm probably going to cry when I get to that part, one of the greatest prophecies is birthed out of him just squeezing a little bit more out of Jeremiah. A prophecy so magnificent that it applies to this present day. Jeremiah squeezing and wringing more out of Jeremiah brought forth a prophecy, not only that pertained to the exile into Babylon, but actually fits each of us in this space. So let's see, let's go through the first part, the second part, and we'll get to the end part. But I wanted to give you that background because the first part is grueling. It seems cruel. It seems very unusual. It seems like it makes you kind of side eye. Yeah, like, are you serious? But when you see what comes out of the prophet because of this additional encounter with we can't do anything but see the beauty of it. And then my last thing, and hopefully if I don't get to hear, somebody reminds me. The last question I have on my page is, where are you in your prophetic walk? And that's where we're gonna hopefully make it to. So I gave you the beginning, I gave you the end. I don't know what's gonna happen in the middle. We're gonna do this together. We're gonna go for it. We're gonna go for it. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Logos Bible app. Jeremiah 16. Starting beginning, guard your eyes. I'll zoom in a little bit too, because I know it shows up a little bit smaller after the fact. Oh, that's a little too big. Okay, that's fine. Oh, it always gets me when a verse opens up like this because Yah speaks. All right, Jeremiah 16, chapter 1, Jeremiah 16, verse 1. The word of Yah came unto me, saying, thou shalt not take thee a wife, neither shalt thou have sons or daughters in this place. I know people, and my kids have asked me this a bunch of times. I know I'm not even verse 1, part A. But how do you know when you hear from Yah? How do you know? How do you know it's Yah? Well, this is a case in point for one way you know you heard from Yah, when it does not align with anything that you would have told yourself. The idea in a culture that has, in a culture and in a covenant group of a nation that has been commanded to be fruitful and multiply and to have children and to keep the lineage alive, for a man who is in the prime of his childbearing age, somewhere in his 40-ishes, to hear, don't have children and don't take a wife. It's like, I'm lonely. Like, we just kind of established this, like, just recently. And the very next thing I hear from Yah is, don't have children, don't get married. Definitely something that came from outside of his personal human experience. He literally was just like, yeah, where are you? Have you left me? Am I abandoned? Are you a seasonal stream? What's the very next thing, right? The practical thing, the thing that falls in line, that follows in Torah, right? Would be something to the effect of, it is not good for man to be alone, right? Wouldn't that be like the next progression logically that we follow? It wasn't that. He told him, literally interjected. This is Jeremiah just, living his life, because he's not just like, sitting in a corner all the time. Yeah, interjects into his space and says, thou do not take you a wife, neither shall you have sons and daughters in this place. And then he continues, for thus saith Yah concerning the sons and concerning the daughters that are born in this place and concerning their mothers that bear them. and concerning their fathers that begat them in this land. They shall die of grievous deaths, and they shall not be lamented, neither shall they be buried, but they shall be as dung upon the face of the earth, and they shall be consumed by the sword and by famine, and their carcasses shall be meat for the fowls of heaven and for the beasts of the earth. He's probably like, okay, Jeremiah is already, as we've established, extremely sensitive as a person. The very sins and behaviors of the people in the land are wreaking havoc on Jeremiah's emotional, mental, and you can even presume physical, just well-being. And so we probably can't see it this way, but how Yah saw it was, Jeremiah, you won't be able to take it. What is getting ready to happen here is not going to be bridled. I'm going to allow the fullness of what is happening to happen. And this scares me a bit, because what he was pretty much telling Jeremiah is, I'm protecting you because you're obedient to me. But the influence and where you may get this wife and who may raise these children, like Yah has already looked at the infinite number of possibilities. And what he was telling him is, your children will be counted in the slaughter too. Your wife will be counted in the slaughter too. So what seems to be desirable and what seems to be within my will also come with great loss. So can you just trust me and not? Because I would hate for you to have to be further afflicted than seeing your father and your mother and your cousins and your nieces and your nephews, them all perish, but then to also have to watch that which comes from you perish in this place. He's like, this place specifically, right? He goes, this place is not it. This whole place is getting ready to experience death and destruction. And so much so that Yah is going to have to exile the people because of the judgment that he's put in this place. It's like, y'all have to leave, because the judgment I'm putting here, it's without boundary. Young, old, everyone. So he says, for thus saith Yah, enter not into the house of mourning. So he goes further. He was like, you're not gonna have kids. People are gonna die. It's gonna be by sword, by famine. Literally, bodies are gonna be left. The beasts and the fowl are gonna, the image is so repulsive that it makes what's currently happening in Palestine and in Gaza right now look like child's play. Because even there, you don't have people being devoured and you don't see animals and things coming and eating children. It's mortifying just to see the effects of what's happening there. But can you imagine now that being you and your family and your children, and it never stopping? Not people in other nations out crying for none of that. None of that. It's just full on slaughter. So then Yah goes further. Says no children, no wife. Because of this, gives him a reason. Then it continues, he goes, and don't go into the house of mourning. And do not weep, cry, give reverence, condolences, and don't mourn them. That one is tough. He pulled a Leviticus 10 on Jeremiah. you don't remember Leviticus 10, let's just briefly go to Leviticus 10. Those who do, you already know where I'm going. Leviticus 10 is when Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, remember they took the strange fire and they put it in the censer and literally, yeah, killed them right there. And literally Moses has to go to Aaron. I'm just kind of skimming through, make sure I don't mess it up. He tells him, and Moses said unto Aaron and unto Eleazar and unto Ithamar, his sons, uncover not your heads, neither rend your clothes, lest you die, and lest the wrath come upon all the people. But let your brethren in the whole house of Israel bewail the burning which Yah hath kindled. And he said, and you shall not go from the door of the tabernacle, lest you die, for the anointing oil of Yah is upon you. It's interesting as a prophet, and in so many ways, a priest at this time, because everybody's gone crazy, that Jeremiah is also given this. He's like, do not go and you don't mourn. Now we know Jeremiah's emotions are unnatural for him. He's already there. He's already here. Then he literally tells him, do not. We covered this, that Jeremiah 10 a while back. I mean, Leviticus 10 a while back. But he says, don't mourn because it can't be perceived that you disagree with me. You can't exist contradictory to what you are proclaiming. Your response has to be so unnatural. Your choice to not have children, your choice to not take a wife is going to be so repulsive that it's going to literally mirror Yah's heart for the condition of the people at the time. He literally has Jeremiah being the embodiment of Yah's disappointment, Yah's broken heart, and even Yah's seemingly calloused gaze at what's taking place. Jeremiah is not just conveying the word of Yah by what he says, but he's also doing it by who he is and what he does. It's moved from Jeremiah just talking and just doing acts to Jeremiah literally having to take on the heart of Yah. And I feel like for some of us, and depends on what part of the revelatory acts of Yah that we're called to participate in, some of us get to show the love of Yah. Beautiful call, right? Not that it's always easy. Others of us have to take on the heaviness of the heart of Yah and reflect that back to the people. And that's where Jeremiah is. I read something by a man named, I think it's like Freethium. It's T.E. Freethium. It was written in like 2002. And he said, the prophet is an embodied word of Elohim. By looking at the prophet's life, the people could see how Yah was relating to them. So if you go back through scripture and you hear and you remember and you can kind of reflect on the verses where it tells the prophets and the leaders not to be bribed, not to be a respecter of person, not to be, easily swayed by certain things. The reason for this is that in the culture, the response of the prophet to the people was equally indicative to the response of Yah to the people. And so when you have good prophets, whether it's chastisement or whatever, it's done in compassion and in love, and it's to restore the people because that's Yah's heart. When you have evil prophets who then preach to the people and allow them to stay in the state or evoke the negative out of the people, it should be confusing. That's why he says, don't be afraid of them because it's not me. And so it's interesting in this passage that how Yah is showing how Yah is having Jeremiah show up. Yah's having Jeremiah show up literally as a person who people want to relate to and want to connect with, but the person is shut off. the person is literally shut completely off. And imagine where you're talking about a culture of hospitality, a culture of joy and mirth, where a person who was very passionate and very vocal and probably clearly still showed up to things and still had hope and dating and marrying in the midst of all this, where that person is completely shut off from society, not only physically, but emotionally. So goes further and he says, verse 6, both the great and the small shall die in this land. They shall not be buried, neither shall men lament for them, nor cut themselves, nor make themselves bald for them. He says, not only are you going to not do the things that you should have done, but even the things that you weren't supposed to do, you're not supposed to do, you're going to be so distraught, you're not even going to be able to do the things to the false gods. You're not going to be able to burn and cut and do all these things that you thought would change anything, because the intensity of what you're going to experience is going to literally grieve you to the point that you won't be able to do anything but be in complete survival mode. He says, neither shall men give the cup of consolation to drink for their father or for their mother. Thou shalt not also go into the house of feasting. He says, so the mourning part, you're not going to mourn. You're not going to offer condolences. You're not going to show up to the normal societal things. When somebody dies, you go in, supposed to give your condolences. He's like, no, you're not even gonna, you're not going. And then he goes further and he says, thou shalt not also go into the house of feasting to sit with them to eat and to drink. He said, because they're not only going to mourn, he said, but then people will still be marrying and giving in marriage, just like it talks about in the last thing. He's like, don't show up to that either. So you won't go. When they feast, you won't show up. And when they mourn, you won't show up. And it's supposed to be indicative of the future that Israel is going to. When they mourn, Yah's not showing up. When they cry, he's not showing up. When they weep, when they beg, when they plead, he's not showing up. And when there is moments of joy, it will be mingled with sorrow, because Yah is not going to give joy and peace. He literally is getting ready to say he's going to literally take peace away. We don't really understand a lot of times fully the value of peace until we've not had peace. When you've had peace, you don't cherish peace the same until you're in a state where no matter what you do and how hard you search for peace, you can't find it. You don't realize that peace is not something that you can give yourself. You can go to the highest mountains. You can go to the depths of Joshua Tree. You can stand in waterfalls. And if Yah has not given you peace, anxiety, depression, all the things that cause you unease will literally follow you wherever you go. And Yah was like, I'm removing peace. I'm the one who says to the brain and to the nervous system and to the body, pause for a second so they can recover. He's like, if I stop doing that, you don't have the ability to even regulate yourself. Because the things that happen in this life are so far beyond human comprehension that we can't. There's no amount of drugs. There's no amount of sleep. There's no amount of fun. There's no amount of a person coming to you and saying, girl, get out of the house, that can take away the angst if Yah has allowed it to be there. Many of us have done it. You could be sitting somewhere and everybody's laughing, having a good time, and inside you're just like, oh, you're in a whole different place. If Yah doesn't give it, it can't be had. You can search, you can go to the ends of the earth, and you'll take you with you. So Yah was like, don't. Verse 9, for thus saith Yah Zavaot, the Elohim of Israel, behold, I will cause to cease out of this place in your eyes, going to see it, and in your days, the voice of mirth. Can you imagine just never hearing anybody have excitement in their voice? Just never. Just, it's gone. And the voice of gladness. The voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride. He was like, it won't be. The fear of that image, the voice of the bridegroom, the voice of the bride, the voice of mirth, is that it's always been until this point. There have been tough things, but it's always been. They've always been in this land till this point. See, you've seen Israel be scattered and dispersed, but even if you're scattered and dispersed and you can look back and see that the people who are your family are still home, it doesn't feel as bad. But what happens when the remnant is moved? That which is left is moved, where you can't look back and see home, where you can't look back and say, well, at least I could always go back there. What is a fear for them is a present reality for us. Proves Yah doesn't lie. It's a present reality for us. It was a present reality for our ancestors to long for a place to go and to have nowhere to return. You couldn't get off the ship and go back to the coast because the coast was occupied. When you got off the ship, you were going to a place that was occupied. You had no friend either place. There was nowhere to go. That feeling had never existed for them before. They didn't know that feeling. Verse 10, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt show these people all these words, this part right here, and they shall say unto thee, Yah gives him a full picture. He's like, not only is this what you're going to do, they're going to ask. They're going to ask you about this. And they're going to ask you, why did Yah pronounce all this great evil against us? The amount of callousness to have heard years of preaching, to have Torah, and then the question to be, why? I feel like Yah had to prime Jeremiah's pump because I would have lost my stuff. What do you mean, why? Like, you didn't hear nothing I said before this? I mean, if he's like, I'm gonna have to tell you, they're gonna ask you this. And I'm even gonna have to give you the answer because I don't need you to pop off. I don't need you to punch nobody. Can't be laying hands on people. He says, they're gonna ask, not only why is Yah being so greatly dysfunctional? Because that's what evil means, against us. Like, why Yah responding this way? And then this, or what is our iniquity? Where have we gone astray? Where in our hearts? Okay, maybe, but my heart doesn't feel this way. Oh, maybe this is pagan, but that's not what I feel in my heart, right? He goes, what is our iniquity? And then go further and say, and what is our sin? Where have we missed the mark? Now, it's interesting because that sounds absurd. But many of us know people who talk like this to you. You just came out of multiple seasons of probably trying to talk to people and point out things. And maybe this is for you to get on board with Jeremiah, right? You come out of this seasons and people are like, what was so bad about that? But Yah knows my heart. How did I miss the mark when I said Jesus was the reason for the season? How did I miss it? Like, how did I miss it? Like, literally, I told my kids, one of these gifts under here is for Jesus, and the rest y'all getting because it's his birthday, and he don't really like gifts, so I'm gonna give them to you. Like, where did I miss it? Like, how did I sin? Like, I made sure that he was aligned. Like, on my page, I went off on my friends who was saying that it was like, it was about this and that. I'm like, no, you got to remind people. And I put a manger out in the dead of winter. Like, I did that. I let people know. Like, I had the whole nativity scene, coal baby Jesus and everything. Like, everything. I did that. So how have I missed the mark against Yah? Like, and then somebody like me was like, well, the manger was a sukkah and it was open air because it wasn't cold. So that was like step one where you missed it. And then it's a lot after that, but I get it. Sorry. Okay. Right? Like, come on. Like this is literally what we all have. We have lived experience in this area. Like, people read this and be like, people wouldn't say that. I'm like, Yes, they do. Yes, they will. Yes, they have. Yes, they have. Oh my gosh. So verse 11, and he says, so they're going to say all that. So your response to them is going to be, because your fathers have forsaken me, saith Yah, and have walked after other Elohim and have served them and worshiped them. That part right there got me. That part right there arrested me. The idea that not only did Yah see it, but he saw all the phases of it. So I wrote down a note. I wrote down a note so that I wouldn't forget this. He says that literally they walked after him. That means that they took their feet from a path and turned. Yeah, I was like, okay, I dealt with that. Then he says, then they begin to serve him. They serve them. They begin to do things toward these other gods. He was like, you know what? Humans can be a little fickle. So I'm going to plead, you may think that that's that, but let me show you that when you're doing that, it's actually service. Like, okay, you saw it, you liked it, no harm, no foul. It's attractive. Then you serve them. Serving is interesting because serving in a lot of ways is often a mimic behavior of what you see someone else do towards something. So it still comes with a little bit of ignorance because the person may be like, oh, see, it's not that bad. Didn't hurt me. It's not going to hurt you. So great. Right? He says, then you went a step further and you worshiped them. He said, see, it was a progression. You just walked after it, like your feet kind of straight. Then you kind of like, well, let me try. I'm a dibble and dabble. Then you started worshiping. Says you bowed to them. See, the in our culture, we don't really have this because we don't bow to people. Bowing has two very, very distinct features within it. The first one is when I bow to something, I am turning my back to something else. You cannot bow to something and keep your attention on anything else that's happening. It requires complete devotion. Second thing, bowing, and the idea of reverencing in the bowing is it is a state of surrender. It is, I am giving myself fully to this because what happens, it's a form of humility because you're saying that the thing I'm bowing to now has the ability to kill me. I'm vulnerable. I'm completely vulnerable to it. And I'm completely open to it. He says, you've become completely open to it. And he says, and then you did something else. So he didn't stop there. He's like, y'all don't know how to stop. And I've watched all this. Can you imagine? We do it as parents. Oh my gosh. My mom used to have this thing where if I went over somebody else's house and behaved better than I behaved at home, oh, that was like the last time I could go. Like, if you can't act like this at home, why would I let you go do that somewhere else? Same thing. If my mom knew that my friends were like not good to their parents, but they came over and they're, oh, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. She'd be like, I don't like her. I don't like that person because they treat their parents like X, Y, and Z. And they go come over here. How much more so? Yeah. Right. Like sitting back and watching and saying, oh, I ain't never seen you do that for me. It just begins to climb. We don't want to give because it makes us extremely uncomfortable to think and to even begin to conceive the fact that we as humans literally are doing things against the power that keeps our heart beating and our breath regulated. That's an uncomfortable thing. So we create this like cognitive dissonance, but Yah sees. He says, you worship them. And he said, and in doing so, I'm adding, he says, and have forsaken me. Because you can't walk after other gods. You can't serve them. You can't worship them and have Yah. It doesn't work. You can't do both and. The world is lied. I'm sorry. Jesus cannot be the reason for the season and also Odin. It can't go together. You can't make it make sense. It doesn't make sense. It'll never make sense. The scripture literally says, do not inquire of the nations how they serve their gods and try to do like they serve their gods to me. It doesn't exist. So people have to make a choice, which people are uncomfortable making, which is, I'm going to serve other gods. I'm not going to serve Yah. That's too much. They're like, because at the root of it, and this is why it's evil, at the root of it, they understand that the gods and the things that they do are no gods at all. They know. They know. And they would dare not fully reject the God who's keeping their heart beating and their mind regulated and air in their lungs and holding the whole universe in the balance. So they think they can do both, not knowing that what they're doing is just applying more and more and more to their account till the fullness of their sin comes and they're judged for it. That's it. That's it. So he says, and have forsaken me. And he said, and in forsaking me, you didn't just turn away from me. You didn't just forsake me. You didn't just cast me aside. He says, but you didn't keep my law. Because people will swear. They will swear to you, oh, I keep the laws of God. You're like, which ones? And they'd be like, well, I don't steal. I ain't killed nobody. Like the 10 commandments. You know, there's some like the first like 3 that are really, really important. Like it's a part of the 10, like making graven images and having other gods and putting people like that part that's not so important. Like it's like you can't. In doing it, you've literally just obliterated the first part, and the other part, you're doing it too, just not in the same way. You did what was comfortable. And so Yah continues to Jeremiah. He says, and ye have done worse. So he lists all the things that their fathers did, because I believe psychologically, and I said this to a friend of mine the other day, we're watching a movie and I said, I realize why people watch certain types of movies, because I don't think when people have complex trauma and they haven't actually attempted to deal with it in a, holistic way, that they can really understand it. So what they do is you watch things and you get to see other people doing them, and it kind of creates a type of therapy where it's like, I know that this has also happened to me, but it's easier to see it being done to somebody else, so I don't have to reflect on it being done to me. And it's interesting because in this passage, Yah goes off on their foreparents, right? Your fathers did all this, and they like, you can almost like, it's not a direct attack, so you can kind of listen. And then he goes and he says, and you've done worse than your fathers. Like that was supposed to be shocking. Once I primed it, right? Like a person says, you know what? I'll use this one. That man only had one lamb, one little lamb. This other man had a whole herd of sheep. And this man took this man's one lamb from him, the only thing he had, the only thing he loved, and he, the whole story. And David, right? I was going to say, the king, but David's response was, that man should die. Like it was easy for him to look at the situation at a distance and pass judgment. And then Nathan was like, it's you, bro. And he was like, ugh. Right? That's the same framing here. Yah was like, your forefathers have done this and this. And they're just like, oh, gosh, I can't believe that. And then he turns and he says, and you've done worse, for behold, you walk after the imagination of his evil heart. See, you've gotten so deep into it that you don't even understand that you've gone past just doing the deeds, and now your forefathers' deeds are now in your heart. That they may not hearken unto me. It's like you can't even hear. Therefore will I cast you out of this land and into a land you know not. This is straight Torah. Straight Torah. Into a land you know not. If you don't know where in Deuteronomy it is, you can find it. He says, into a land you know not. And he says, and there you shall serve other gods day and night, where I will not show you favor. This is not a new prescription. This is the same thing over and over and over again. Gives them the same thing. And that was intense. I told you the first part is like wild. The second part, it'll go fast. I got like 2 notes. Yah tells Jeremiah this, and can you imagine Jeremiah sitting back like, you have stretched me beyond my capacity to be stretched. You are causing me to literally be an outcast. I have to say the most wild things with everybody saying opposite of what I'm saying. I'm going to tell people that their children are going to die, and that's going to make them not want to kill me. Yeah, definitely. That's not going to happen. And then the last thing I have to say is that they're going to be cast out to somewhere they don't know. And they're going to have to serve gods day and night. And I'm not going to show them favor. See, they didn't know that. They've always had Yah's favor. Literally, always had Yah's favor. I saw a person write when I was reading just through some different stuff. And the person was like, why would God, so they said, why would God lie? Didn't God say that he would always be there for the people? And it was interesting because as I sat with that, I was a little like, some things you read and you're like, I don't want to read anymore, but you read because you feel like you need to understand where the person was coming from. And as I sat with it, the thing that came to my mind was the obedience is what evokes the compassion. The fact that Jeremiah was trying is what created this compassionate relationship between him and Yah. The fact that we're trying is what evokes the compassion. Disobedience puts you in a place of chastisement and judgment. Chastisement and judgment is not always death. It didn't have to be this. This was so far down the line because of their condition. They did not respond to Yah's compassion. They did not respond to Yah's mercy. They did not respond to chastisement. So then death and destruction is the end result of a lack of response to compassion and mercy. It's the end result. And so in thinking about what the person was saying, I was like, no. What happens is when people are dysfunctional, Yah has to prescribe a situation that is supposed to cause a return to functionality. So let's talk about just spanking. Not everybody agrees with it. Okay, but here we go. After it normally comes in a functional sense, the idea of getting popped or getting spanked comes after there has been boundaries. There has been an expectation set. There has been, depending on how age appropriate it is, an explanation of what that is. And then what tends to happen is a complete disregard for the things that have been put in place before I have to then try to do something that sears, based upon a sensory imprint, into this child's mind that what you're doing is dangerous. What you're doing can harm you. So if, for me, growing up, I didn't wait for my kid to run to the street, then spank them and say, don't go in the street. No, we walked the sidewalk. And we learned where cars are and that cars are dangerous and not everybody sees you. And this was small from the time they could walk. And you don't run into the street. And if you run into the street, you can get hurt. And that would break mommy's heart. And you go through all these things, right? So that the day the child runs out into the street, there has been so much love and compassion and explaining the dangers of these streets. That could be taken a bunch of different ways. That a pop, right? And it's never excessive, right? It's just like, no, you're not supposed to go in the street. Street's dangerous. Oh, this is what she's talking about. I got popped because, what do we do? Let them get hit by a car? No. But there's pain associated with the streets, right? Now, if this kid continues to go in the street, the type of chastisement may increase. And if this kid doesn't learn at all, I mean, I don't think any of us gotten this point, but you're like, you know what, you might have to get ran over. I don't know, because I've done everything to try to show you that this space is dangerous. The same is true here, where you say, how could God get tired of being God? It's like, not God getting tired of being God. If there's never a consequence for a behavior, then the behavior will never stop. It will never stop. It will only get worse. And it's interesting because when we talk about, we kind of made jest of it, but it's not a thing to really have jest made of it. When a person gets caught up in something so deep without consequence, it is almost impossible to pull them out of it. In The Matrix, if you guys seen that movie, there was a part, and I'm paraphrasing, where he's like, you're one of the oldest ones that we've actually been able to pull out, because at a certain time it just becomes impossible to pull people out of the matrix. And it's that same way. What happens is people are convinced, because of these moments of manufactured joy and mirth, that they're actually being blessed. And it's hard to convince a person to turn away from something that actually brings them joy and pleasure, to have to go towards something else. The mind is already preconditioned. And so people who get involved in certain constructs, it's difficult because there really isn't any chastisement necessary, because why would the adversary make your life difficult? Or why would you have these terrible things happen? No, I want you to continue to do this because you're going to be happy further and further away from God, and then eventually end up completely disconnected from him. That's the point. So yeah, you are going to feel blessed. You're going to be around people who encourage you in the dysfunction, because it's the encouragement in the dysfunction that seals the deal on your ultimate fate. And the ultimate fate here is death and destruction. The difference now is, a lot of times people don't get the ground opened up, or the captivity, or the da-da-da-da. We don't ever equate what happens to us with our personal decisions, because we lack accountability just as people in general, where at this time they were supposed to see all of these things happening as a direct correlation to them. And we've talked about that in the past, the animals and the famine and this and that. It was supposed to be connected. When a people gets to a point where they can't see literally the atrocities of the world connected to their disobedience, there's a problem. People ask, if there's a God, why is this happening? My question is, what are you doing? What are you doing to contribute to the collective dysfunction in society? Because we're contributing to it. We're interjecting into it. We can't say we believe that Adam and Hawa were in a garden and disobeyed Yah, and it created chaos for the entire world, and not also agree that our disobedience also creates chaos in this world. While everybody's sitting up, and not that anybody is, I'm not dismissing any evil of any capacity, but what breaks my heart for Palestine and the people that were kidnapped and raped in Israel and so forth and so on, that's our fault. That's our problem. That is a direct connection to our disobedience. People go, oh, I can't believe these people did that to them. I can't believe that our ancestors gave up their land for other gods, and then created a gap in the space-time continuum, in my mind, in the world where we're supposed to be occupying this place. And now all of this fighting is to uphold a lie. It's to continue to conceal an issue and a breach that we created when we created a breach between our Elohim. The whole entire world is affected because of our ancestors. And now, if we don't get it right, it'll be us too. If you don't believe me, it's in the second part of Jeremiah. But it's true. It is true. Literally, if you go to Revelation, the whole world and creation. See, that's heavy. That is heavy. The whole entire world and the creation is waiting for us. Crazy, right? At the same time, the whole world, who knows, those who've been called to keep the secret, are trying to keep it concealed, because everything changes. Everything changes. This is the beauty of Yah, though. He brings Jeremiah, brings him out. Oh, Jeremiah's like, this is wild. And then there's verse 14 to the end. I think it's his first, like there's like 5 more verses. This is why, with all the things and the infinite things that I've probably experienced in my life and you all have and in the universe, this is why I'm still right here. With all the attractive things that other people do, and that's why I'm still right here. This last part, there's nothing else like it. Verse 14, therefore behold, because I think, let's read. Therefore behold, the days come, saith Yah, that it shall no more be said, Yah liveth that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But Yah liveth that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from the lands whither he had driven them. And I will bring them again into their land, and I will give that I gave unto their fathers. Behold, I will send for many fishers, saith Yah, and they shall fish them. And I will send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill, and out of holes and out of rocks. For mine eyes are upon all their ways. They are not hid from my face, neither is their iniquity hid from mine eyes. And first, I will recompense their iniquity and their sin double, because they have defiled my land. They have filled mine inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable and abominable things. And pause there and they'll get to the last part. Yah goes and he gives like the most gruesome picture. And then the heart of Yah doesn't end there. So you're like, Jeremiah's not going to show up and he's not going to be able to mourn. He's not going to be able to have joy. But then the next thing out of Jeremiah's mouth after such a harsh condemnation and judgment is, but guess what? Egypt. Remember Egypt that everybody talked about, the Exodus? This is a story. Remember, Passover is huge in our culture, right? It's huge. Passover is so huge that even into the Brit Hadashah, even to the New Testament, they're still talking about how Yah brought the people out of Egypt. It was impossible. It's impossible to be fully integrated into a system, to be bound and held in bondage, and for literally the whole natural world to come together for the redemption of Yah's people. Everything responded. Hail, locust, everything was like, oh, you setting your people free? Sign me up. Lice was like, sign me up. The sun was like, sign me up. I'll go dark. Everything was willing to be obedient for the redemption of Yah's people. So when you hear it brought up again, it's not brought up the same way. This prophetic word that comes out of Jeremiah is so intense that Jeremiah prophesied beyond Babylonian captivity. Babylon was in the north. He said, not just the north, but from all the lands where they've been driven. He goes beyond just that captivity. His stretching of his own commitment allowed him to be able to have vision beyond the time frame in which he even existed. And then he goes a bit further in this part. Oh, it got my heart. He says, see, when a lot of people think about fishermen and hunters, they think of the idea of like death. And it's twofold, right? It can be viewed 2 ways, that the people would be fished and hunted. So no matter how far the people went, you can go all the way down to present transatlantic slave trade, everybody got it. The kingdoms that ended up on the Gulf Coast and of Africa, and everybody got the chastisement that was coming to Yah's people. No person, no matter how far people, well, that was so far ago. It wasn't far enough for us not to be hunted and shipped and receive the chastisement that was brought upon our people. We got it, right? He says, but in this case, it's beautiful because it's the beauty of redemption. He says, yes, you've been scattered. He said, but I'm going to make you, watch this, fishers of men. Why? Because the promise was there was going to be a time where now the people would be, you'd be getting them back. They'd be being fished back. And then those who were not, you know, in the traditional sea of the people, then Yah would get so specific, and this is beautiful, that he would have people who have heart and compassion and knowledge and alignment to know how to hunt them. To hunt something, you have to know what you're looking for. And not just any kind of hunt, but he says, not just, oh, you know, he's like, it'll be so specific, they'll know to look for them in crevices and rocks. There's no corner of the world. If my eye was on their iniquity and I saw it and I scattered them, there's no corner of the world and there's no period of time where they've left out of my sight. I still see them. I know if they're in holes and in rocks and if they're buried, if they're in the sea, he's like, I'm going to send people to bring them back to me. And he says, one of the writers says, if Yah doubly repays Israel's iniquity and sin, which Jeremiah actually hoped for, says, then Yah can also redeem them doubly. If he's going to do the chastisement in double, then the redemption is also going to be just as magnanimous as the chastisement was. There's hope. Then he goes on. He says, verse 19. So Jeremiah is getting this word and he's like, he finally responds. He goes, oh yeah, my strength and my fortress, my refuge in day of affliction. He hears that and he's like, I gotta ask. Something gets stirred up in Jeremiah and the prophecy is given to him and then he begins to wax prophetic. And this additional part of the prophecy is what gives us hope. That's why it's so beautiful. Oh yeah, my strength, my fortress, and my refuge in day of affliction. He says, the Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth and say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and the things wherein there is no profit. He adds to it, his vision, and his vision is so clear. Remember, Jeremiah is a seer. Remember, that was the beginning. That's how he was trained by Yah to see. What is this? It's an almond bud. What is this doing? What do you see? I see a seething pot. Jeremiah can see now. And in Jeremiah being able to see, he sees the whole picture of redemption. He sees the full picture of salvation. He says, oh my God, you're going to take the disobedience and the destruction of this place and the exile of the people and them being scattered, and you're going to use it, like what? You're going to use it to bring other people, and those people are going to confess and say that their fathers, it's not even, the verse says that they inherited lies. The word inherit here is this idea, and I'm going to see if I can pull it up. It is this, it disappeared. Oh, here we go. It literally means to get or take possession, to receive as an inheritance. So this is twofold. It's not just the idea of inheriting, like, okay, somebody told me a lie, but it also carries with it that they also were expected to maintain the lie. When you inherit something, you're also expected to maintain the inheritance so that it can continue to be passed down. So the lies that these Gentiles are confessing to inherit are twofold. It comes not only with a responsibility, but it comes with the oppression of the truth. So the Gentiles, Jeremiah sees, and I don't even know if it probably made sense to him at the time. You have these people that are going to come back and say, not only did we have lies, but it was vanity and it didn't profit us any. You literally have in this passage the return of the nations linked to the return of, linked to the exile of Judah and Israel. The last phrase in this chapter reveals Yah's purpose in those events is not simply negative. Yah's judgment is not for the sake of judgment. Yah's purpose in judgment reaches beyond the judgment to the knowledge of who Yah is and that will be taught to all the nations. David said it best. He said, purge me, cleanse me, forgive me, right? And he says, so that I could do what? So I could teach transgressors your ways. That it's always supposed to point back to Yah. We get caught up. A lot of us got caught up in the first part, right? The idea that, oh my gosh, I know I'm the people. Then what is the next part? You cannot resist prophecy. The point of the exile, the beauty of something that was so tragic, the promise that we hold to is that our coming to the knowledge of who we are and returning in the lands where we were, because it actually says it, we're going to get to it in Jeremiah, but even Solomon said it in his prayer in 2 Chronicles. He said, and if they bethink themselves wherever they are, and they turn, the idea of that is supposed to turn everybody. That was the point. Jeremiah didn't have a dog in the fight. So he was able to clearly see it. He literally said, oh my goodness. Oh yeah, my strength, my fortress, and my refuge in day of affliction. He said, I can't even believe this. He says, the Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers have inherited lies, vanity and things wherein there is no profit. And then Jeremiah goes further and he goes, shall a man make gods unto himself, and they are no gods? He's processing. He's like, okay. Like he's literally like pondering. And then he goes, and Yah responds to Jeremiah, and he says, therefore, don't even say much. Behold, you get it. He said, right here. I will this once. When I do, it'll be once and for all. Cause them to know, and I will cause them to know the idea of yada, to actually have an intimate knowledge. All of this that's happening, all of this that we read in our scripture is going to create such an intimate knowledge when it all makes sense. I'm going to cause them to know, and I will cause them to know my hand and my might. And they shall know. No was in there. It won't be for play. They're going to know that my character is I am. That's how he's like, they're going to know that that's who I am when it's all said and done, because over and over and over again, yeah, he's like, don't forget I do this for my name's sake. And don't forget I do this for my name's sake. And the reason why I'm promising this year is for my name's sake. He's like, don't ever get it to, I don't care how long it takes to bend the block. It's for my name, and they will know. I told you the last part, and we're going to wrap up with this. The last part is, where are you in your prophetic walk? Jeremiah I've like wrung and stretched, and this is what comes out. We live in a delicate time because we're in a time of redemption and revelation. There is no more in captivity in the way that we've seen it before. There's just death and destruction. And we live in an interesting time. And it's considered to be the time of Mashiach. It's people get, caught up in days and times and when things are going to happen, but it's not so much just a day and time. It is, but it's also an era. And there's certain things that are supposed to take place in that era. And so we've been given a blueprint. History just repeats itself. Messiah came after a time of great death, destruction, and disruption of culture, right? That's why you get the Maccabean period. You had like the fall of the temple. You had all this stuff happening. And then you have this uprise of this messianic era. That's a pattern. That pattern ceases with the return and the redemption of the people. But as the pattern continues, there's going to be continual periods of the messianic period where you're going to have these revelations and this uprising. That's why Joel talks about it, right? That their sons and daughters are going to dream dreams and prophesy. Why? It's evidence of what's happening until it's fully fulfilled. I believe that, yes, time is, it's a ticking, but also there has to be a knowing. That's why in Revelation at the end, he's like, I'm going to cause them to know that you're mine. Why? They're going to know like they know, and then they make a decision. It's not something to fool people. It's not something that was ever supposed to be concealed. It's being concealed by crafty counsel. But you cannot be known without the appropriate response to the covenant. It doesn't work like that. So when I was studying, this is months ago now, it was interesting because Isaiah 61 and Jeremiah 16 are literally like parallel passages. Talks about the beauty of what is to come. And I believe, and it's not the same for everybody, I think people are called to different things depending on where you are. But I believe for me, at this point in my walk, at this point in my life, we understand the destruction, but do we understand the beauty of redemption? And when Messiah came, he's like, the destruction's going to come, the death is going to come, but can you be drawn in loving kindness? Can you see that again? Is that period done? I don't think so. I don't believe we're in a period where Yah's like, my peace is gone. I'm done. I don't think we're there. I think people are there because people are hurt, but I don't think that's where Yah's heart is. It will get there. The Revelation talks about Yah's heart being like, no, there's some space and time to repent. And then it's like full steam forward, blood to the horse's bridle. So let's look at Isaiah 61. I'm not going to give commentary through it. I'm just going to read it because I feel like it needs to be read. Most of you all know this, but you're going to probably see Isaiah 61 in a new light after Jeremiah 16. Isaiah 61 verse 1 says, the spirit of Yah Elohim is upon me, because Yah hath anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He hath sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yah, and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all that mourn, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of Yah, that he might be glorified. And they shall build the old wastes. They shall rise up the former desolations, and they shall repair the waste cities, the desolations of many generations. And the strangers shall stand and feed your flocks. And the sons of the alien shall be your plowmen and your vine dressers. But ye shall be named the priests of Yah. Men shall call you the ministers of Elohim. You shall eat the riches of the Gentiles, and in their glory shall you boast yourselves. For your shame you shall have double, and for confusion they shall rejoice in their portion. Therefore in their land they shall possess the double. Everlasting joy shall be unto them. For I, Yah, love judgment. I hate robbery for burnt offerings, and I will direct their work in truth. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them. And their seed shall be known among the Gentiles, and their offspring among the people. All that see them shall acknowledge them, that they are the seed which Yah hath blessed. I will greatly rejoice in Yah. My soul shall be joyful in my Elohim. For he hath clothed me with the garments of salvation. He hath covered me with the robe of righteousness. As a bridegroom decketh himself with ornaments, and as a bride adorneth herself with her jewels. For as the earth bringeth forth her bud, and as the garden causes the things that are sown in it to spring forth, so Yah Elohim will cause the righteousness and praise to spring forth before all the nations. Many people don't know that that was actually Messiah's sermon. Jeremiah, told you, goes down as a failure as a prophet. People hated him forever. But Isaiah prophesied. Jeremiah echoed. And the prophet that no one can deny preached it and made it true. Declared in his first sermon that this is what is going to take place. We have such a great cloud of witnesses and so much to hope for. And it is our responsibility to not let the things of this world taint the promise that Yah has for us. It's double. It's double. Our job is to now have the appropriate response to the covenant so that we can be able to participate and be able to inherit what has always been ours.